Good morning. My name is Sandy Wolfwood, a member of the Social Justice Ministry team here at Westminster. We build the social justice forums around a common theme, and this program year our theme is diving deeper together so all will flourish. This theme builds on our heightened awareness of the systemic and critical issues affecting our community, brought to greater attention in recent years, most especially in response to the murder of George Floyd. Through the forums, we will learn about long-standing needs and become more prepared to support the flourishing of all members of our community. Today, we also welcome the Adult Education Group, who will be joining us. Today, we welcome Maria Regan Gonzalez, Mayor of Richfield and the first Latina mayor in Minnesota. Maria is also Director of Equity Initiatives for Minnesota Health Fairview. By way of introduction, I'm going to read a paragraph from a Star Tribune article. After co-launching daycare provider training for the Latino community, spearheading Blue Cross Blue Shield's health equity program in Minnesota, and fighting apartment purchases that displaced low-income families, it is perhaps no surprise that Richfield Mayor Maria Regan Gonzalez received the 2021 Woman of Power Award from the YWCA Minneapolis. Gonzalez, a former city council member, has been Richfield's mayor since 2019 and the first woman of color to serve in that position. She reflects on her childhood, on racial disparities, and her work helping Minnesota families, people of color, and immigrants find decent housing, education, healthy foods, and jobs. Her topic this morning is addressing race and health inequities in Minnesota. A couple of short notes to our audience before we begin. For those attending in person here in the Meisel room, you can raise your hand and I'll bring you a microphone so that you can, including those on the live stream, those on the live stream can hear your question or comment. And for those attending on the live stream, please submit your comment or question in the live stream chat, and I'll monitor that and raise your question or comment. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Maria. Welcome, Maria.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Maria Regan Gonzalez. I'm super excited to be here. So today I'm going to talk about racial and health inequities in Minnesota and what we can do to address them. So I am all about action and giving tactical, tangible tools for folks to make change in their community. That is my passion and what I do. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So I understand that your theme this year is diving deeper so we can all flourish. So when I thought about what does that mean in terms of what I want to share today, I was thinking about how do we dive deeper to better understand how we can do our justice work differently. I think a natural inclination is to do the analysis paralysis or to really study the issue. The area where I think we need to grow more and dive deeper is what are some tangible, practical tools that we can carry out in our own community to advance justice work. So that's what I want to talk about diving deeper today. So the key takeaways that I want to make sure that we're thinking about today, and I hope I communicate well, is we need to do things differently in our state. And in our country. I don't have to give all the examples why. There's plenty of science out there and in research, and we see it in the news and we see it in our communities, that the gap between the haves and the have-nots is just growing tremendously, and the inequities across all areas in our community are growing, and our community is suffering very much right now and in so many ways, and that we need to lead and govern differently. So I'm briefly going to talk about the state of racial inequities in Minnesota and health inequities. Again, I'm not going to spend too much time there because I think there's plenty of information out there about the issues. I really want to focus on how can we contribute on larger scale systemic change for justice, because again, we don't want Band-Aid fixes, we don't want one and done attempts. We need large-scale systemic change in our community. And the way that I have practiced and what I have experienced through my years of working in community is that there's this special kind of recipe And, I haven't read about this out in literature. It's just from my personal experience that when you mix public health approaches, I'm a public health nerd, when you mix public health approaches with community organizing and concepts of racial equity and diversity, equity, and inclusion, and that internal spiritual self-work, this is when you're actually able to do some very impactful, large-scale systemic change. Any one of these things, we see this in public health all the time. We just think that we're going to implement public health solutions. Well, guess what? Oftentimes when we don't take these other things into account, we end up perpetuating inequities in the name of equity. And so this helps us assure that we are really taking in the community into account and that we're leading with equity first, and equity does not become an afterthought. So then I'm going to give a few examples, of course, of my community in Richfield, and then provide some time for reflection and discussion. If I had to pick a poem that describes my leadership in a nutshell, it is this. So Thich Nhat Hanh is a Zen Buddhist teacher that has really led so much of my life as a leader. He has informed my work. He actually just passed away recently. But this, in my opinion, this poem, and I usually have the book and I forgot it in my office at home, this is what it's all about in a nutshell for me. And he just says it so eloquently. So the poem is called Heart Like a River. If you pour a handful of salt into a cup of water, the water becomes undrinkable. But if you pour the salt into a river, people can continue to cook, to wash, and to drink. The river is immense, and it has the capacity to receive, embrace, and transform. When our hearts are small, our understanding and compassion are limited, and we suffer. We can't accept or tolerate others and their shortcomings, and we demand that they change. But when our hearts expand, these same things don't make us suffer anymore. We have a lot of understanding and compassion, and we can embrace others. We accept others as they are, and then and only then do they have the chance to transform. So the big question is, how do we help our hearts grow? So to me, that's what leadership is about. That's why I'm on this earth, is to help my heart grow, to help the hearts of the people in my community grow so that we can hold the complexity of the issues that we face collectively and actually move forward real transformation, not symbolic, but real. So quick introduction to myself. That's my family. That's my brother, my sister-in-law, one of my nieces. I have a brand new niece. She's 3 months. I have my parents are in Madison, Wisconsin. But introducing myself, I'm a proud biracial Chicana from the Midwest. My family is from Mora, Minnesota. My dad grew up on an Irish-Swedish dairy farm in Mora, with his great-grandparents being Irish and Swedish immigrants. And my mother is from Mexico City. We grew up, and half of my family is here in the Twin Cities, and the other half is in Mexico. So I grew up here in the Midwest, but going back and forth constantly to Mexico. So I'm very bicultural, very Midwestern. I grew up playing ice hockey, eating hot dish, going to Mille Lacs Lake at the cabin, but I also grew up with all the Mexican traditions and culture as well. I got my master's in public health at the University of Minnesota recently, and my undergraduate was also from the U of M in international studies. I work as the systems director at Fairview, focused on how do we transform the largest healthcare provider in Minnesota, which is also the 4th largest employer in the state, to embed equity across every single thing that Fairview does. One of the things that we're doing to make that happen is I hired on a restorative justice coordinator. So what does it look like to embed restorative justice within the healthcare system? So these are the types of things that I do in my day job. My partner and I also have a data and analytics consulting business. He runs it, but I provide support to it sometimes. And we leverage data and organizational change to transform food and ag businesses, so that we're providing and supporting a robust food system. And then I lead as mayor of Richfield as well. And I'm a proud co-founder of La Red Latina. We'll talk more about this amazing child care provider network. But as you can see, this is my passion, is going within large, mainstream, clunky institutions that are slow and need to change, and to catalyze change within them. So that's what I love. So very briefly, people know that Minnesota is one of the best places to live, the best quality of life, access to good employment, good schools. That's what we hear, great park systems. That's what we hear on the national scene about Minnesota. And I think we're hearing this other story more because of the killing of George Floyd, but this has been true for quite a long time. Minnesota is also home to some of the worst racial inequities in outcomes across the board: health, educational attainment, graduation rates, incarceration rates, in access to green spaces in the nation. So while we might have a very high quality of life overall, if you're a person of color living in Minnesota, in terms of access to these opportunities, it's one of the worst places to live. So this is the context that we live here in Minnesota. Again, there's a ton of data on what these racial and health inequities look like online, and to be honest, I'm kind of tired of talking about the problem. I'm just more interested in doing the work. So again, this is what I'm here to talk about. The how do we make change? It can be overwhelming. The issues are very complex. So for me, this is my special sauce that I use, is taking frameworks that focus on racial equity, diversity, and inclusion. Why? Because we need to understand our frameworks, our way of thinking, and be able to honor who we are while simultaneously providing space and openness to work with people who are different from ourselves. That's the racial equity. And of course, we want to center race in all we do, because regardless of income, regardless of education, race is the leading differentiator that we see in outcomes. And so we need to be explicit about race, but not exclusive. It's not just about racial equity, it's about equity across the board, but we need to be explicit about racial equity. Public health practice, I'm going to share a little bit about why this is so important. Public health practice gives us frameworks for actual large-scale population systemic policy change. So these are the scale of change that we want to be working on. Public health gives us great frameworks to do that work. Spiritual grounding and self-work. When we are not aware of who we are and what our drivers are and what is our true north, or how the traumas that we have faced or experienced dictate kind of how we lead in the world, when we lack that self-awareness, again, this is kind of a red flag area for wanting to have really great intentions with really horrible outcomes. Again, this lack of awareness can lead to thinking you're doing something in the name of equity, and then you end up perpetuating inequities. So you have to be grounded in who you are. And as a Latina who is a politician who had to run campaigns, to be honest, the political world is very hard. And in my opinion, if I didn't have my spiritual grounding, I can see how leaders get eaten up by ego, lose their way because they don't have the spiritual grounding. And as a woman of color who is out there, people have threatened me, people are pushing you to do what they want, and that doesn't necessarily mean that it's always the right thing. I've never once faltered or collapsed or buckled under political pressure, and I've been very pressured to run as a Democratic candidate. I'm a nonpartisan candidate. I'm not a part of either party. I'm focused on my community, and my community encompasses all different political parties. And the Democrats also disenfranchise our communities constantly. My passion is not about reforming a party. My passion is about supporting community leadership. So I have made the decision to be a nonpartisan mayor. And I do so because I'm grounded in my identity, I'm grounded in my spirituality, and my commitment to community. And community organizing, these are the tools that give us the tools to advance the frameworks that we get in public health for this large-scale systemic change. Community organizing offers the tools of how to do that. So these are just big concepts. I'm going to give examples, but just think about how this might translate into the work that you're doing or the work you're supporting. Where are there gaps? Where can you strengthen? So public health framework, we have something called the spectrum of prevention. So before we're getting to people in the hospitals and people dying, we need to be focused on prevention. So we have here in the spectrum of prevention, we have kind of the one-on-one individual knowledge, strengthening people's individual capacity. At the top, we have influencing policy change and legislation. Then we have everything in between, organizational practices, fostering coalitions and networks, educating more broadly in the community. Systems change should be in there, it's just not listed, but systems change is in here as well. So the thing I love about these public health frameworks is that this should be the foundation of any strategy in an area that you want to improve. If you want to work on gun violence, you want to work on diabetes, you want to work on maternal and child health, it doesn't have to be a health issue, it can be any issue. But you should be mapping out who's working on the individual stuff, who's doing the policy change, how are we working together. These frameworks help us think generationally because the impact that we do in public health is generational impact. It helps us ensure that we're working at all different levels, and it helps us ensure that we're building an actual movement and it's not just a symbolic type of change. What I will say is if we do this and we can't assume that equity is going to be baked into this because it's not. So there's a gap here where we need to make sure that we're baking equity into this process. And that's where I think public health or any discipline, honestly, can really fall short, is that they use these frameworks or whatever the framework is, but they don't bake equity into the process. Another framework from public health that I love is social determinants of health. What does this mean? This means that 80% of what actually creates an individual's health or makes them sick has nothing to do with the healthcare system, whether you're actually sick or healthy physically. 80% of health is created by social factors, our race, our ethnicity, our income, where we live, our education, job status, income, physical environment where we live, and our behaviors. So we need to be focusing on this 80%. This encompasses everything. Everything outside of healthcare, that's health. That's what we should all be focusing on. So this is a great framework that I think of because I think all of us are public health professionals, all of us are doing the work of public health, and this is what it looks like. So these are the things that are going to make healthy, thriving communities. We need to focus more on this 80%. 20% is healthcare system access and quality of care. In this country, healthcare is not a right, it is a privilege, unfortunately. And we need to change that. But the majority of the money in healthcare goes into that 20%, and we're missing investments in that 80%. So that's just a little bit of the frameworks that I use every single day for my work in building community change. So that's the frameworks of public health. Now these are the tools. Community organizing is a discipline. You can take classes, courses, read about it online, but essentially community organizing is about building the power, the agency, and the ability to make change of the community most impacted by an issue. It's focused on relationship building, building your constituency group, educating folks, building a culture of change. And the thing that is most important to me is building power. People think power is a negative thing. People think power is a tool that's used to manipulate people. And we need to do so much more work on understanding what power is. Power is not good, power is not bad. Power is the ability to make change. That's it. The ability to make change. So when I think about improving my community, do I want to build power? Yes, I do. I want to make sure that my community has the ability to make change for themselves. So this is the big conceptual kind of framework of community organizing. These are concrete tools. I'm not going to go through all of them, but in the discipline of community organizing, there's a lot of different tools that help us build power, build a movement. One of the things that I use the most is called one-on-ones. This is where you sit down in person with one person face to face, and you just get to know who they are. You understand their perspective, you learn more about them, and you understand what they care about. But what we do, especially professionals, is we say, I have funding, I have an idea, I want to do this thing, and you go and you sit with someone in the community and you say, I want to do this, do you want to do this? And you try to get people to buy into your idea. Again, when we don't take the time to build relationships, this is where we can start operating with good intentions, but not really supporting community to lead their own solutions. Again, there's a lot of tools to build power. There's things called power mapping, stakeholder mapping and analysis, changing dominant narratives. This happens in public health a lot too. But what is the dominant narrative out there? One that I work on a lot in my role as mayor, which has to do with health, is what the dominant narrative is around affordable housing and apartments. People think, oh, renters are transitory, their affordable housing brings crime, they're not a value add to our community. So we had a whole campaign that focused on showing who renters in Richfield were. We have renters that have been renting for 20, 30 years. We have people who are deeply invested in our community. We have renters who are teachers, and so humanizing and changing the dominant narrative can be really big. And again, building this movement. Organizing tool 101 is making sure that the people most impacted are the ones driving the change. So these are all things that you can be learning more about and making sure that you're engaging in so that the focus is actually building equity and is actually bringing solutions from the people most impacted. The third bucket that I talked about is racial equity, diversity, and inclusion frameworks. We need to understand what our worldview is. We all have prejudice, we all have racism, we all have discrimination baked in to being a human living in our society. So we need to understand, where are we at? Minimization, this is where most people in Minnesota, well, I don't know about most, a lot of people in Minnesota are in minimization. This is, I don't see color, I don't see race, I just see a human. We are all the same. This is attempting to move towards accepting everyone, but you're really seeing differences as a negative thing. And you're saying, I don't see that. Instead of recognizing that we are actually different, you actually do see color, you do see race, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. You can honor difference. Acceptance, I bet, since you guys have been doing a lot of this kind of work, I bet you might be between here and here. Acceptance is you understand that there's discrimination, you understand that there's racism, you've studied it a lot, you get it conceptually. And the next growing edge for acceptance is what do we do about it? How do you take action? How do I get to adaptation where you can take action, understand the inequities, but you're able to adapt given the scenario, the situation. You're able to stay true to who you are as an individual or community, but you're also able to adapt and flex based on the situation you're in, and you're taking action. You're bridging across difference. Acceptance, you deeply comprehend difference. Here, you're actually bridging. So these are important concepts. It's not to judge anybody, but once you understand this for yourself, and you can take a test, there's all kinds of cultural type of comprehension things that can help you. Once you understand where you're at, once you understand where your organization is at, once you understand these concepts, you can say, how can I speak to the self-interest, this is using the organizing tools, to people in minimization? What are concepts and language that are going to help bring these people along? And how do we help move them here? A person who's speaking in adaptation to a person in the us versus them, it's not going to work. You need to understand that someone might be in polarization, and how do you speak to someone in polarization? So this can inform not only your work one-on-one, but it should be informing the work you're doing on a bigger scale. Another concept from racial equity, diversity, and inclusion is something that's called the continuum of being an anti-racist, multicultural institution. Again, a spectrum of anti-racism, in this case, understanding where is your organization at? Are you in the symbolic change? Are you tokenizing, racial equity? Are you really exclusive? You're not even close to that. Racial differences are bad. Or, are you working on structural change? Are you really fully inclusive? These are concepts to just help inform the work that you're doing. Oftentimes, these things are not thought of, and the consequences are inequities in the name of equity. And then lastly, the thing that is so important, if you aren't doing the work internally, none of this matters, because you're going to be operating out in the world in a very careless, haphazard, ungrounded way. And you may feel good about yourself at the end of the day because you think you're advancing the work, but you're really not. And you're actually being detrimental to the work. And this is an area where I see a lot of people not doing the work. Who are you? What are the values that you have? How did you grow up? How does that inform your worldview? Why are you of service to the community? If you don't know yourself, you have very little chance of knowing anything else. This, to me, is the foundation of who I am. This is what allows me as a policymaker to make very hard decisions in spite of a ton of pressure that I get from all different sides. I'm a bridge builder, and as a bridge builder, you have to get used to and be okay getting walked all over. And I will tell you, I'm okay with that because that is my work. Let's see here, I'm just looking at the time. So I'm going to end soon here. I have a lot of examples, but I'm going to have to go through my examples. So in Richfield, we've done a lot of amazing work, but we have started with building out the foundation through community organizing of the people most impacted through our Red Latina de Educación Temprana, which is a child care provider network that we started. We have mobilized over 350 Latina women, mostly low income, mostly undocumented, mostly renters, to build their power and agency around taking care of their kids, providing quality, culturally appropriate childcare. And from this group that we've invested in and mobilized, they've helped us close racial inequity gaps in vaccination rates. They've helped us address the food insecurity needs during the pandemic. They've helped pass affordable housing policy work, Tobacco 21 work in Bloomington and Richfield. They've fundraised over a couple $2 million at the state level for family, friend, and neighbor child care providers. The same group of women, a lot of them live in Seasons Park in one of our lowest income apartment complexes in Richfield. We were almost displaced because of a sale that would have gone to a market rate developer, but because we were able to mobilize and organize the community, we secured within 10 days of hearing a rumor that there was a sale and confirming that there was a purchase agreement that was not yet signed, but that was in process. We were able to call Aon because we had our organizing networks and connections that we leveraged, and they put in a blind counter offer and said, we know there's an offer to you. We are going to put in whatever that offer is. We're going to match it, and we want to keep families in their home. That ended up being a $36 million blind offer to keep people in their home that was accepted. We put pressure on the seller with the community organizing, but we did the inside organizing with the public policy makers to give $150,000 second mortgage to help through our Economic Development Authority to do all this work to keep families in their home. 2018, we won our Mayoral Campaign, making me the first Latina mayor in Minnesota, which, by the way, is ridiculous. We've been a state for over 150 years, have hundreds of cities, and have elections every 2 to 4 years. That's unacceptable. But when was the last time you see in a local campaign, or even a bigger campaign, where you have some of our most disenfranchised community members going up to the dais and saying, this is our community, this is our city, this is our election, and putting their hands up in the air out of pride and celebration. So we were really working on transforming our community. Again, you can see the difference when you do the work based on the people most impacted. So since then, we've had a ton of equity wins at the city of Richfield, again, coming from the people most impacted around police reforms. We didn't have anything going on around sustainability. We have a climate action plan that is now rooted in racial equity. We did the scariest thing a local government can do. We organized our trash, recycling, and organics. Oh my gosh. We passed a prevailing wage policy, wage theft ordinance, human traffic ordinances. We have built out our citywide infrastructure to embed equity across all of our work. Wood Lake Nature Center is 150 acres of pristine wildland, the only wildland located in the urban core. And we're overhauling it and making sure that as we overhaul it, we are taking our communities of color into account. And lastly, I'm going to give an example. This is a public health example, but you wouldn't think of it as that. There's the 35W 494 reconstruction going on. This is a once in multiple generation reconstruction. This is the busiest trafficked and most trafficked part of highway in the state of Minnesota, and people from all over the state go here and use this every single day. It's also the most congested and dangerous, not just in the state, but regionally. They wanted to start the project and do all the improvements west of Richfield and Bloomington here, west of 35W, Eden Prairie, Edina, Bloomington. Why? Not because they had the most traffic and the most accidents and the most congestion, because it was the cheapest place to start. And our group organized, and we had 2 public policy makers and votes on the committee. We organized with Seasons Park, which is located here, which is the people we've been investing in for years and working with. We put pressure on the committee. Because of that pressure, they decided to start east, where we have the most people of color, the lowest income, the most renters, and the most congestion, because we have all these little interchanges that are creating traffic and accidents. Not only did we get them to change the focus of where to start, we also got them to create this pedestrian bridge that would not have existed. So this pedestrian bridge is called the Chicago Avenue Bridge. It doesn't exist yet, but it's a part of the project now. Why? Because we told them they have to focus on racial equity in this project and that they weren't doing it. That bridge is going to go right here, connect Seasons Park to their #1 grocery and supply and food source, which is Sam's Club and Walmart. Right now, people have to walk all the way over to Portland, walk across the bridge, walk over, and walk back. Now there's a direct access point. So this is generational impact focused on, led by the people most impacted, focused on advancing racial and health equity. These things are huge. This is the type of change we need to be doing. So I'm going to wrap up. I know it was really quick, and I'm sorry about that, but I really wanted to show some important concepts. And I wanted to open up for questions. So hopefully, what I was hoping to get out of today is to help you think about our work and community differently and get you to think about, are you using all these different tools in your work? Let's see. Are you using all these tools? And if not, where can you be growing? Where can you be improving? And who is doing this work? And how can you support that work? My job today is to help grow your growing edge, get you out of your comfort, and help you think about your work differently so that we are able to work together to move large-scale systemic change forward. So I'll end there, but I don't know if folks have questions.
Maria, that's amazing. Yeah. I'm really glad to find out all that you're doing, and particularly the last part you described was really interesting for me to see what you've accomplished, particularly along the corridor you're talking about. Yeah. And I guess there are a couple of questions that have come in line, but what I wanted to start with was I want to hear about the barriers you ran into as you made all of this change, because it sounds easy, but I want to hear more about some of the problems.
It's not easy. You see, I'm 36 and I have all this white hair. Actually, that's genetic. I started going white when I was 12, but I like to pretend that was the reason why I'm going white. If I was not spiritually grounded, I wouldn't be here today, I can tell you. The barriers, oh my gosh, so many barriers. First of all, I will tell you from when I first ran for office, I was in my late 20s for East Side Richfield. I didn't know anything about campaigning, and you should hear the things that people told me. They said, nobody knows you, you're too young, you're Latina, you didn't come from the party. The party has picked somebody that has been groomed for years for that position, and did that person have any connection with the east side of Richfield that's mostly renters, low-income people of color? Absolutely not. They were the leader of the PTO and some of the sports teams and things like that in the high school. And they said, you're never going to make it. And you're so not going to make it that even if you're dumb enough to run for office, get rid of the Gonzalez and run to cater to the white middle, of the road candidates, because you're going to need everything to help get their vote. Did I do any of that? No, I didn't. I ran as myself. I didn't run as a political figure. I ran as Maria Regan Gonzalez. We ran mobilizing community. So me having to prove myself to people has been one of the biggest barriers. Having to meet people's expectations that are always contradictory to one another. But the thing is, because I know who I am and I'm grounded in my identity and in my spirituality, I don't have to change who I am, and I can lead as myself. And because of that, all these people learned they can lead as themselves, and they don't have to be afraid. And so that's just made things a lot slower and harder because I had to prove myself. But I think people are scared of my leadership now in a good way because they see the impact of what this leadership has. So that's one of the biggest barriers.
Can you talk a little bit about, for instance, getting that bridge put in or working with Seasons Park? I notice Aon is involved in that 36 million, and we've been involved in that as well. Talk a little bit about how you got the powers that be to listen and to pay attention to the people on the other side of
For sure. So I use a core concept in organizing. I don't know if I put it in here. It's called inside-outside organizing, okay? Outside organizing is those most impacted, putting pressure on large stream institutions. It's people marching in the streets. It's people, community members, protesting, advocacy, things like that. Inside organizing is systemic change, and these are the people inside the system. We often don't talk about this, and we actually think sometimes poorly of these people. I'm an inside organizer. But you're not going to get change unless you have people on the inside to catalyze the change. So you need to be working together. So we're not going to, and if we wait for the system to change for us, to give permission that, okay, we're going to change now, we're going to die. It's never going to happen. But if we only do outside organizing, we actually remove ourselves as the problem so that they can continue to perpetuate inequities and not have to change. So, because I can organize both outside and inside, we didn't need permission from anyone. Nobody gave us permission to do any of this. We mobilized so many people. We filled the council chambers on a regular basis with up to 200 people who had never been there before and scared the crap out of people. And said, listen, you don't have to listen to me. It's not just me. When I say something, it's all these people saying something. And if you don't want to listen, we're going to be here after you, time after time after time. And we were organizing with other people on the inside who are awesome policymakers, who want to advance equity, who have the power and ability to do so. So we were mobilizing on both sides so that eventually there was just no other option. For the 35W494, you should have seen how many times they said, we can't do that, we don't have the money. And we pushed, and literally it took me, I'm here, making phone call after phone call to the representatives who were voting in Edina, Eden Prairie, Bloomington, Richfield, and I organized and I said, listen, I want you to vote this way. Why? Because this is going to benefit you. How? And I made those calls. So it was through organizing that we did that.
I'm going to take questions from the room and raise your hands when you have them. But a question from Doug Mitchell online is, where did you get your community organizing training? After I learned about it as a discipline, I realized I grew up as an organizer because of my mother. But I will tell you here, there's a group called Voices for Racial Justice. They used to be organizing apprenticeship program. They do awesome organizer trainings. Isaiah does week-long, and they do awesome organizer trainings. There's Race Forward nationally. But I was an organizer because I grew up as an organizer. Every day after school, my mother started the first Hispanic outreach culturally appropriate services for victims of sexual and domestic abuse. My brother and I would walk every day to the shelter, take care of the kids, clean up the storage spaces. And our parents told us, the only difference between you and your family in Mexico is that you happen to be born here. That's the only difference. And they live in a very dangerous place.
They sometimes don't have water, they don't have food. Los narcotraficantes control their area where they live. There's no jobs. And they said it is incumbent upon you and your responsibility as a person with privilege to use that privilege to improve your community. And now my mom is like, can you just come down and have kids? And I'm like, do you remember how you raised me? Going to shelters and working as a child in this space? How? No, it doesn't just turn off. It's become who I am. And my brother's the same. He works with at-risk youth, and he's a break dancer, and he travels all over the world. He's the cool sibling. And he break dances, and he teaches kids how to use their passion for something like breakdancing or art. When they have that difficulty around them, they can channel their energy into the safe space and create something beautiful. So he does the same.
Great. Questions from people here? What more can you tell us about Seasons Park? I want to know more about that because I haven't heard about that before, and I'd like to know more.
It's part of a bigger story, and since there's not questions, the story starts in 2015 when there was the largest mass displacement in the state of Minnesota of low-income housing, which was in Richfield by Best Buy on Penn Avenue, called Crossroads at Penn. There's a TPT documentary called Sold Out. Oh, and so what happened is there was a sale that nobody knew about. And essentially what they did is put some paint on the outside and on the inside, and they became luxury, market rate and luxury apartments. About 2,000 low-income residents were displaced, mostly people of color. 145 students in the Richfield School District were displaced and left homeless. That was a direct loss of $1.5 million to the school district and an immediate layoff of 33 staff just from the displacement of this one apartment complex. People were left homeless, they were displaced and couldn't find anywhere to go. When you live in a huge affordable housing complex and affordable housing is a crisis, where are you going to go? There's nowhere to go. And so at the time, it resulted in the largest fair housing settlement lawsuit in the nation's history that put some very important precedents, legal precedents. That 2 years later, and only 3 months into becoming a new ward council member, the next largest unit, which was Seasons Park, but had over double the children, 500 children, more than double. Imagine if the loss of 145 children, imagine if we would have lost this 500. We would not have a school district today. So, look at the difference between what happened when you're not organizing, you're not connected to the people most impacted, that's what happens. And look at when you are mobilized, organized. In 10 days of hearing from the superintendent of the schools that there was a possible agreement in place, we organized affordable housing advocates, we organized tenants. Santos is one of my closest friends at Seasons Park. He's the maintenance man. He's lived there for many years. These are all the residents that we organized, La Red Latina, we organized them. And from 10 days, we got Aon to put in a blind counter offer. We kept people in their homes. And this place needed a lot of improvements. We've put in over $12 million now to date of improvements and renovations without raising the prices in the rents on community members. We had a mobile vaccination unit come straight to our community to make sure our families are vaccinated. They've helped us pass over 20 different affordable housing tools in the city of Richfield. So this is what happens. This is the difference night and day between taking an approach where you're actually supporting the people most impacted or when you're not.
So do you have a question?
I have a question actually directly related to dovetail off of Sandy is my larger interest. I'm interested globally in racial and equity for all, but my biggest area that I work on is health and health equity. I'm a nurse practitioner. Can you would you address how, since you mentioned the vaccine clinic, how we're addressing health equity to people who can't get to their doctor's appointments because they walk or they're working or they're working 2 or 3 jobs, and then they're trying to just, I guess, hardly pull their lives together just by all the working that they're doing?
So that was the foundation of the whole presentation, is that we need to blend public health. I had it here. We need to blend public health structures and frameworks with all these other areas. So I had explained that I use a social determinants of health framework. So this comes straight out of public health. So we are constantly thinking. The reason why I became mayor and I ran for office is because I'm a public health nerd, and I know that this 80% of health is who makes decisions on your roads and your physical environment and your education and your jobs? Local government, the mayors, the city councils, the school boards. So that's why I ran for office, because they oversee that 80% for the most part. So I think going to your local government structures, whether it's school boards, city councils, and helping them make this connection between the 80% of what actually creates health in the role that they have. Because I will tell you, most city councils and mayors, I went to a national conference of mayors and I asked the question, mayors don't think that they're public health professionals. In my mind, they're the #1 leading national public health professional, our mayors, because they control all of these factors. But they think they're just reacting, they're providing core basic services and they're reacting to crises. And so the more we can lay this groundwork and connections for our local leaders, the better, because transportation is a cost. Affordable housing is a cost. You're going to have to ration your money and pay the bills, buy food, or pay for your medication. So we got to work with our local governments on these issues.
We have about 5 more minutes. Please raise your hand in the room if you have a question. One thing I know, as I've heard you talk about organizing and enabling people to have a voice who don't usually have a voice, when you get into city government or county government, but places where decisions are made and there are hearings on things, one of the challenges I know is having those broadcast enough so people know they're coming up and these are points of decision. And making sure that you get people there. You've talked about organizing people. How have you done that? Do you have special tools you've used? What sorts of things have you used?
I mean, essentially, I leverage the network of awesome people. Let's see where we have Latina. So I leverage the amazing network of powerful women that I have worked with over the years and leaders. I make sure that in each kind of constituency of my community, I have a couple people in there. I don't need to organize, all the people in an apartment complex or everyone in a church. But if I can have people that I have a connection with that have trust of their community, then that's how you mobilize people quickly. And so what we do is we map out, and that goes back to power mapping, which is a key organizing tool. Well, it's in there somewhere. You use your power mapping. Who's in this constituency group? Who's in this constituency group? Who are the leaders in our senior complexes, apartment complexes? Who are the people in our faith communities? You map them out. You identify leaders, and then you work with them to say, when we need to mobilize for affordable housing policies, we're going to call you, and I need you to mobilize your people. And then that way, we fill our council dais and our council chambers with hundreds of people. And so you got to have people at all levels. There needs to be people tracking what are the agenda items, what's coming up, and then mobilizing along. And that's the inside organizing and the outside organizing. You have to have people on both sides working together.
Thank you. I think we're coming to the end of our time here together. Thank you, those of you who have attended in the audience and online. Maria, this has been really enlightening, and I think we're all going to be paying a lot of attention to what's happening in Richfield and look for your name moving forward, because it's pretty exciting hearing about some of your work. Watch the church announcements and bulletin for the topic of next week's Sunday Forum, and we look forward to seeing you then. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, everyone.